Word of the week, electromagnetic spectrum. The electromagnetic spectrum describes all wavelengths of light, both seen and unseen. Light is a wave of alternating electric and magnetic fields. The propagation of light isn't much different than waves crossing an ocean. Like any other wave, light has a few fundamental properties that describe it. One is its frequency, which is measured in hertz, which counts the number of waves that pass by a point in 1 second. Another closely related property is the wavelength, the distance from one peak of the wave to the peak of the next. These two attributes are inversely related. The larger the frequency, the smaller the wavelength, and vice versa. This is why it's important to be in a high frequency mindset, because it's been shown already that when you're in a high frequency mindset of unconditional love, appreciation, happy, excitement, all of those types of mindsets, the light waves that emanate along your DNA have a very short, quick, undulating pattern, a wavelength, which means that the light energy is touching more of the DNA, which means you're recoding yourself, you're reprogramming yourself. When you are in fear, doubt, hatred, and all those other types of mindsets, those low frequency mindsets, now you're getting a very slow undulation of light waves or wavelengths along the DNA pattern in your body, which is giving you a low frequency vibration and not allowing you to access deeper realms of higher thought, consciousness, multidimensionality, and all the other things. It's allowing you to be completely manipulated and utilized by the matrix system. So you become susceptible to the matrix when you're in a low frequency mind state. This is why it's always important to operate from a high level of consciousness. These are the light waves that we can see: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet. That's all human beings get. We get this very, very short visible spectrum, and probably for a good reason, because if we could see everything that's out there, we'd probably freak out, because there's things going on all around us that if we could see all these things, we wouldn't even be able to focus on driving down the road. The electromagnetic waves your eyes detect, which is visible light, oscillate between 400 and 790 terahertz. That's several hundred trillion times a second. The wavelengths are roughly the size of a large virus, 390 to 750 nanometers. 1 nanometer equals 1 billionth of a meter. We're talking about very small scales. A meter is about 39 inches long. Our brain interprets the various wavelengths of light as different colors. Red has the longest wavelength and violet has the shortest. When we pass sunlight through a prism, we see that it actually is composed of many wavelengths of light. The prism creates a rainbow by redirecting each wavelength out of it at a slightly different angle. So when you see a rainbow in the sky, it's because the sky can also be used as a prism or operate as a prism and break light into scattered rays, and those scattered rays become what you see as a rainbow. Well, we only can see in those rainbows a very small part of what's really there, because we have only access to this tiny, minute ability to see light waves. If you look at a light wave chart, you can see that there's gamma rays, there's X-rays, there's ultraviolet light, infrared, radar waves, microwaves, television waves, radio waves, none of which we can see. We can't even see Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is also waves. We can't see any of that stuff. We get to see a very, very small visible light range, this tiny nanometer light range that we get to access and see. But the rest of it is going on all around us, and you have to understand that that's what's happening around us. As a matter of fact, if you had a device that could collect ambient electromagnetic waves, because they're flowing around us, in us, and through us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, if you can have a device that can collect those, you can turn those ambient electromagnetic waves, you can convert them into energy. Plugging in your cell phone for charging is just ridiculous. You can literally walk into a cafe somewhere that's running an electromagnetic machine that's literally capturing those waves and then turning it into power that you can use to wirelessly charge up your cell phone, for example. There's so many uses for these waves. There's a lot of waves all around us, and we're not really tapping into it because they want to meter and monetize, obviously, oil and so forth. This is an image from the Very Large Baseline Array, the VLBA, which shows what the galaxy M33 would look like if you can just see it in radio waves. This image maps the atomic hydrogen gas in the galaxy, and the different colors map the velocities in the gas. Red shows gas moving away, and blue is moving toward us, okay? So now we're talking about something called redshift. So as something is moving away from you, it becomes more red. As something is moving toward you, it becomes more blue and purplish. This right here is just ironic. I just twisted the galaxy a little bit, and it kind of resembled to me a Paracas skull from Peru, elongated skull with the eye sockets and everything. Nothing to do with this. It's just very interesting that this was like this. I thought it was very interesting. Okay, let's talk about light now, because Thoth in the Emerald Tablets talks about using light waves to create solid matter, manifesting solid matter from light. Ken, is that something that's possible? You know, somebody talking about this in ancient times? Well, let's take a look. Physics.org again, guys. I like to bring in real science. Imperial College London physicists have discovered how to create matter from light. A feat thought impossible when the idea was first theorized 80 years ago. In just one day, over several cups of coffee in a tiny office in the Imperial's Blackett Physics Laboratory, 3 physicists worked out a relatively simple way to physically prove a theory first devised by scientist Brayton Wheeler in 1934. Brayton Wheeler suggested that it could be possible to turn light into matter by smashing together only 2 particles of photons of light. The creation, they basically found a way to create an electron and a positron, the simplest method of turning light into matter ever predicted. The scientists had been investigating the unrelated problems in fusion energy when they realized what they were working on could be applied to the Brayton Wheeler theory. And then the breakthrough was achieved in collaboration with a fellow theoretical physicist named Max Planck, who I love this guy. Max Planck is an amazing guy. The Max Planck Institute for Nuclear Physics, who happened to be visiting the Imperial that day. So over a cup of coffee, they got with another quantum theorist, quantum physicist and theoretical physicist, and really, bottlenecked it and figured out how can we turn this light into solid matter, and they've now done that, which is really amazing. So now turning light into matter, as was talked about in ancient texts, real. So when you hear these things being talked about in ancient texts, you have to understand, guys, they're talking about things that they were capable of doing, because why? We now have rediscovered the same technology just now in what we call modern times. Contemporary science tells us that the universe is made up of energy, matter, and light. Those would be what the alchemists called sulfur, salt, and mercury, respectively. According to Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared, energy and matter can be transformed into one into the other through the constant of light. In alchemy, sulfur and salt are transformed into one another through the intermediary of mercury. Excuse me, it looks like that if the little c in Einstein's equation really stood for consciousness instead of light, there would be no difference at all between the physics of alchemy. And let us assume that consciousness is light. In that case, the Emerald Tablet for the 21st century would look something like this. The Emerald Tablet news release, okay? This is what we would modify to if we put consciousness for the C instead of what's there now. Truly without hype, religious exploitation, or commercial consideration, you can experience higher truths. You are as much a part of material as you are of the mental. And you are as much part of the mental as you are of the material. In order to accomplish the miracles of light, and just as all things come from this light, through the concentration of consciousness, so do all created things originate from this light through the transformation of thought. Its father is energy, its mother matter. The spectrum carries in its belly, its nurse is the earth. It is the origin of all, the consecration of the whole universe. Its inherent strength is perfected if it is materialized. Separate matter from imagination, the subtle from the gross. Gently in this deepest meditation, the light rises from the earth to heaven and returns again to earth, thereby containing within itself the powers both of the mental and the material. This is how you combine consciousness and create matter. Thus you will obtain the light of the whole universe. All darkness will be illuminated to you. This is the greatest force of all powers because it overcomes every mental thing and penetrates every material thing. In this way, the universe is created. From this comes many wondrous manifestations because from this formula, therefore, this deals with 3 parts of reality and shows an underlying relationship between energy, matter, and light. Now we have completely explained the fountain of consciousness talked about in the Emerald Tablets and other ancient texts. We're talking about using our conscious thought through meditation to convert and create our manifestation and our reality tunnel and make it go in the direction that we'd like. And also we're talking about seeing things from a higher plane of existence and understanding the fundamental workings of them so that we can manipulate them to our benefit and get them to work to our benefit and to help ourselves and also to help others. Let's look at magnetite crystals inside the human brain from Physics Today. We're going to talk about now how we actually encapsulate the stream of consciousness that's coming into our avatar bodies. Magnetite crystal exists inside of your brain, billions of them. Billions of magnetite crystals are inside of the human brain. Okay, this is something that you really got to understand. You know, when you look at sea turtles, how they navigate the ocean and come back to nest where they were born to lay their eggs, how birds flock to the south for the winter and navigate the planet, how whales navigate the oceans, and all this. This is all based on magnetite crystals. Well, they discovered that human beings still have access to our magnetite crystals. We just don't discern them like we used to in ancient times before we became Homo sapiens sapien. I think this was a purposeful disconnect that was done. But through some scientific study and research, they discovered that the brain still follows the magnetic fields. If you put a person in a room and put a magnetic field around the skull and move it around, they can detect that the brain is picking up that field. How? Because we have magnetite crystals in the human brain. Those crystals also do what? They capture information. Crystals are good for communication. Crystals are also conscious in themselves. Crystals are their own sentient beings. So in your brain, you have a symbiotic relationship with another sentient consciousness that exists inside of your brain, separate from you, but still a part of you at the same time. When you have crystals or technology, you know, when you look at radios, how do radios work? The crystal set radios, which initially were devised by Nikola Tesla and then much later actually put into physical use by other people. It's a crystal receiver that receives radio waves, it oscillates at a specific frequency, and then it gives you the verbal sound or the audio sound that you hear, and then your brain decodes that sound and you get the information. Crystals are amazing pieces of technology. You can take a crystal and put it inside of a lighter. When you press down on a lighter to light something, to create a flame, there's not two pieces of metal rubbing in there. What's in there is a crystal being depressed. And when you put pressure on a specific type of crystal, you get a spark of electricity. You get energy out of it because they're also raw energy. There's so many aspects that I could talk about crystals. Crystals can store oxygen. You can actually make crystal oxygen tanks, which is something that we're working on at First Class Space Agency. Crystals, you can quantum entangle crystals, and you can transmit information from one to the other instantaneously, bypassing the speed of light. And all this is operating inside of your human brain. The crystal magnetite in the brain can be seen as follows in these areas, mostly along the cerebellum and the brainstem area. Now, what's interesting here is it's a very interesting picture. There's something else that works along with the crystals when you're in this meditative state called the neural correlates of consciousness. The parts of your brain that generate self-awareness. Researchers at the Allen Institute for Brain Science discovered 3 giant neurons. One of them is projected across the cortex like a crown of thorns. Sound familiar, guys? The story of Yeshua, or some people call Jesus, wearing the crown of thorns. The whole story of Jesus, in my personal opinion, even though I believe that Yeshua is a real person that did walk this planet, is also created in a way that gives you, it's supposed to take you to Christ consciousness. It's supposed to let you know how to tap into these higher realms of information. And some of it is allegorical, some of it's real. This part here, I think, is the allegorical part, wearing the crown of thorns, is representing this neural correlates of consciousness. It's representing this crown of thorns, which is really an actual giant neuron that wraps around the entire brain, which works in conjunction with what? The magnetite crystals. Those two things together help to harness the stream of consciousness that's coming in from a higher dimension and inhabiting this avatar body. These neurons connect to the claustrum. The claustrum, like the conductor of an orchestra, it coordinates the inputs and outputs and then helps to download consciousness. This is coming from science magazines, guys. This is not coming from Billy Carson's brain. Let me say that again. It coordinates inputs and outputs, which then help to download consciousness. It is located on each hemisphere of the highly dense region for perception, movement, vision, and hearing. This is the claustrum. This is connected to the neural correlates, which is then interacting with the magnetite crystals. I'm teaching you how your being, yourself, your conscious, your universal conscious self has become its own separate stream to give you your individuality, which is an illusion, and put you inside this avatar body so that you can collect information and send it back to the source again. This is what we're doing.